In this course, we're going to be looking at recreating Limbo for Task 3A of the Music Tech specification for 2015-16. Limbo is quite a nice song. There's going to be a few challenges. And all we're going to do in this video is just walk you through some of the ways in which we set up the project. And as I always say, the setup is probably one of the most important parts of the whole process, because if you don't get it set up in the exact right way or in a good way, then you're going to find yourself backtracking an awful lot. And this is what we're going to try and stop happening here. A lot of my students, they'll get about a few weeks in and they'll realise they haven't set their tempo tracks up properly, or they haven't set up their guide tracks properly, and they end up kind of redoing lots of stuff just purely because of these basic things don't get done. So here's the score in front of us, and we're just going to take down some of this information. So the first thing we're going to look at is the tempo, and we're going to put that into our score. And it's vital that we get this tempo in and then we check the track against it. So we are going to need to import the Limbo track and make sure that you get the exact one that the specification requires. Sometimes there are a few different versions and they're quite specific about the version that you should use. This track we're going to be sequencing all the way through, so there's no cut-offs, and they expect a really nice fade at the end. So the first thing, the tempo is 130, the time signature is 4/4, and the key signature, depending on how you're thinking about this, can either be D flat major or B flat minor. I'm thinking about this as B flat minor, and the reason for that is just this first chord that opens up is kind of just the starting point for a B flat. So I may change my mind, but it doesn't really matter as long as you understand the key that you're in and you understand the notes that are written here. So let me just run through the notes that you're going to need for this piece. Now, as you can see that there are 5 flats. They are B flat, D flat, E flat, G flat and A flat. The only 2 natural notes are C and F. So just keep that in mind. When you're playing this, if you're playing it in live, unless it's written differently, the only white notes on the keyboard that you'll be playing are C and F. Everything else will be a flattened note. So I think we've got all the basic information that we need. Now we just need to look through the structure. So let me come away from the score and we'll go into what I've currently got for my Logic file. So the structure for this piece is mainly 8 bars, but each section is 8 bars, but there are a couple of these 4-bar sections. And if I zoom out, I'll show you what I've labelled them. Now there's a couple of kind of discrepancies about the way I've labelled them, and you may not agree with the way I've labelled them, and you might think actually that's a bridge or that's something else, or I would have called that, and that's absolutely fine. You can call it whatever you want, it really doesn't matter. I use these labelling conventions as a guide, so as my track gets bigger, I can decipher what section I'm in and which parts might be repeated. So let's just go through what I've called them, and you can make up your own mind on what you're going to call them. The first thing you need then is a marker track, and as you go through you can just create these extra markers and then label them. So the first 8 bars is an intro, then we've got verse 1 for 8 bars, and then we've got this 4-bar pre-chorus, then we've got another 8-bar chorus, then we've got what I think is a repeat of the intro, verse 2, another 4-bar pre-chorus, and then we've got a chorus, and then we've got, whizzed past it there, then we've got this smaller intro, followed by a little solo section, followed by a full intro or thereabouts, and then we've got this triple chorus, followed by pre-outro and then the final fade. And once again, I've called them these things, but if you think that they're different, it really doesn't matter. As long as you've got a way of identifying each of the sections, that's absolutely fine. The next thing that I do then is import the track. Let me just zoom back in. So what I do is import the track, and that's nice and easy. You can get the track from Amazon, or you can get the track from iTunes or from a CD, whatever you want. As long as it's the right track that the specification requires, grab it, drag and drop it into this file, and you're away. Now, with this particular piece, I've actually just left it on the bar 1. You can be a little bit more specific if you want to. If I zoom out, you'll see that actually there's no cut off here, and I've just kind of lined up with bar 1 as much as possible. And if I come to bar 2, you'll notice that actually my transients are fairly decent and they're in the right place, and I'm fairly happy with that. So I've not had to move it around very much, but you might decide that you are going to move it around, and that's absolutely fine. as long as when you turn the metronome on, you're hearing that one beat in. And I'll just play just a couple of bars just so you can hear that the metronome is on and everything is in place. Let me just solo this and press play. And so that I can hear the metronome, I've actually turned the track down. I wouldn't necessarily recommend turning the track down. I would normally leave this at 0, just so that you get a proper reference of how the track is comparing against your track. So once you've got that in time, brilliant, we're almost done. The only other thing that I would do if I was you, just to check the tempo stays the same all the way through, is put this BPM counter in. Now you can get this from the metering section under BPM. And just open this up, and as you go through, it will give you a quick reference to the actual time of the track that it's been placed on. So as you can see, I've got this put on my main track, and as I go through, you'll see that it's 130. And I would always recommend listening to the track loads and loads of times and just keeping an eye on your transients and keeping an eye on these 130s. One way in which I keep an eye on my transients, just to make sure they're all lined up to the one beat, and that I can hear they're all lined up to one beat, zoom out and zoom in like that, so you've got a really good point of reference. And you don't need to go too far, maybe like so you can see one bar at a time, and as you play through it, you'll get a really good indication if things have changed. For my money, everything stays the same at 130, but you should definitely check that. Okay, so in the next lesson we're going to look at the drums and start getting down a guide track for our drums.